There's a group of people who remember rotary phones and the first iPhone launch, and the culture still can't agree on what to call them. If you were born roughly between 1976 and 1985, you're on the tail end of Gen X. But you're not fully a millennial either, even though people keep trying to force you into one box or the other. You're what many writers started calling a Xennial around 2014, and some sociologists describe it as a microgeneration because the window is so specific. And what happened during that narrow slice of history created something genuinely worth examining. So today, we're going to look at what makes Xennials psychologically interesting, because you didn't just live through change, you were shaped by it, right in the years that matter most. From the start, your childhood was fully analog. Boredom wasn't a problem to solve, it was something you sat with. You memorized phone numbers, you knocked on doors, and if you missed your favorite TV show, it wasn't on demand, it was just gone. But then, right as you were moving into adulthood, the world flipped, not gradually fast. Email became normal, cell phones became normal, the internet stopped being a thing some people had and turned into the default. Most generations grow up inside one technology paradigm. Xennials didn't. You got both during the years you were still forming identity, habits, and the way you relate to other people. Think about what your teens required. Plans weren't fluid. You couldn't text running late. You just showed up and hoped your friends were there. Conversations disappeared into thin air. Notes were physical. Social life was real time, and if you weren't there, you missed it. That demanded a different kind of trust, a different kind of follow-through, a different kind of commitment. And then suddenly you're in your 20s watching the digital world stack up overnight. First email, then chat, then early social platforms, Friendster, MySpace, Facebook, and eventually the always online era. Before that, you had maybe 3 reliable ways to reach someone: a home phone, a work phone, or showing up at their house. Then, almost overnight, you had endless ways to contact people, and you simply adapted. That timing matters because of how the brain develops. A lot of the systems tied to long-range planning, impulse control, and adaptation keep maturing well into the 20s. So Xennials were still in a high learning window when the environment changed in a way that forced new skills. You were young enough that technology felt learnable, but old enough to remember what came before it. That creates a kind of bilingualism that's rare. Gen X, especially older Gen X, often approached tech with skepticism because they were already adults when it exploded. Millennials, especially younger millennials, don't have real memory of life without the internet. But if you're a Xennial, you can do both. You can sit through a face-to-face conversation without checking your phone every 30 seconds. And you can also learn new software without feeling threatened by it. You remember what it felt like to be genuinely unreachable for hours at a time, which a lot of younger people have never experienced. And this shows up in ways you might not notice, like privacy. You grew up in a world where embarrassing moments faded, that awful haircut, that breakup, that messy party night. There wasn't a permanent archive, no camera in every pocket, no algorithm surfacing your past. So your memories could behave the way human memory normally behaves. They could soften, evolve, turn into stories, lose sharp edges. Research on autobiographical memory suggests our brains naturally edit and reconstruct the past. We keep what matters and let the rest fade. But when everything becomes searchable and permanent, that process gets complicated in ways we're still catching up to. And then there's the other major factor: money. A lot of Xennials entered the job market or hit early career years around the 2008 financial crisis, which meant instability landed right when you were supposed to be building stability. That timing matters more than people think. When economic stress hits during early adulthood, it can leave long-lasting psychological fingerprints: how you think about security, risk, spending, and trust in systems. So you end up with a generation that learned to adapt to massive technological change, but also got economically burned right when it was supposed to start working out. You can navigate change because you had to, but there's often an underlying current of what if it all collapses again, running under the surface even when things are fine. And nobody really talks about that combination. Instead, the cultural conversation pits Gen X against millennials as if everyone born between the late 60s and late 90s had the same experience. But when the world is changing fast, the exact years you were born create completely different realities. Xennials live with a weird paradox. You carry the self-reliance of Gen X because you grew up before helicopter parenting became standard. Your parents often didn't know where you were for hours, and that was normal. You learned to solve problems, entertain yourself, tolerate boredom, and handle frustration without immediate rescue. But you also reached adulthood during that early internet phase when technology still felt like it was going to connect everyone and solve everything, before we realized it might also create new problems. So you end up in the middle, independent but adaptable, skeptical but open, analog in your nervous system, digital in your behavior. What seems to define Xennials is an ability to hold contradictions without it feeling uncomfortable. You remember the before and the after, so you can see what was gained and what was lost. You might not be as purely nostalgic as Gen X because you genuinely appreciate modern convenience, but unlike many younger people, you also remember what we gave up. The ability to be alone with your thoughts without effort. The patience that comes from waiting. The kind of presence that exists when nothing else is competing for your attention. And yet, you gained connection, information, and opportunities your younger self couldn't have imagined. If you're a Xennial, you probably feel like you don't fully fit anywhere, too young for some things, too old for others, caught between worlds. But that isn't a flaw, that's the defining feature. In a world that keeps changing faster than anyone can predict, having already lived through one massive transition may be one of the most valuable psychological trainings you could have gotten. Because you learned something the rest of us are still trying to figure out: how to adapt, without losing yourself in the process. If this resonated with you, I'd really appreciate you subscribing. And if you want to help me keep making content like this, consider becoming a channel member. Your support genuinely means a lot. I've got more deep dives coming, different topics, same kind of depth. I'll see you in the next one.